I was going to say it's me again, Renaissance man, and I'm a far better stagehand than speaker, I can assure you. I've called this You Only Cherish Those You Protect, because it's a bit like, you know, that Irish saying we have of a fiddler's invitation. You're only invited in the full knowledge that you won't be able to appear. So what I'm going to focus on ESC rights, but I just want to give some sort of a context to it. The quest for rights is timeless, really. Even if we go way back to the Gracchi brothers, who were tribunes in ancient Rome, they tried to introduce measures of subsidising food for poorer people and a redistribution of some land. Unfortunately, equality didn't go down very well in the Roman Republic, so they were subsequently murdered and dumped in the Tiber. However, it just goes to show that it has a longevity that we sometimes forget about. Magna Carta, of course, and this is a significant year for Magna Carta, even though it's essentially a British institution. I think it's a bit we should adopt, because there was a Magna Carta Hibernia as well, which was introduced by Henry III, and it's still part of Irish statute law, and that ensures us of some very good rights, including freedom from torture, habeas corpus, and the right to due process in law. But I suppose the big move forward was the democratic revolutions of France and America, and that brought the right to be able to what the French called fraternité, the right to be able to assemble, the right of free speech, and the right of equality of opportunity. And in that period, there was a huge shift where people moved from being subjects to being citizens with rights. And that's a very important one. And it also laid down the foundation for democracy and eventually a universal franchise. And in a way, democracy has given us a lot. And maybe we need to look at it again and see how it's been implemented. A bit like rights. Maybe the focus should be on implementation rather than the concept. The big jump forward was with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, and that clearly and simply defines the rights crucial to human dignity. And it's a powerful document, it's a simple document, and it gets to the point. And that eventually begot the two mighty covenants of 1966, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. And they were always intended to be indivisible. You cannot realise one without the other. And I think the points that Cian Ferriter was making earlier on, that really you can't access your rights through the courts unless you have the economic means to do so. And you do need legal supports to do that. The other thing was, it's totally pragmatic. Like, it doesn't expect overnight change. It's about progressive realisation over a period of time that rights will gradually be improved. And it's sad to say that in this day and age, we're still fighting to hold on to the basic concepts rather than implementing them. And in terms of progressive realisation, that really counters some of the drama queen fears often expressed by Michael McDowell, that really these rights are impinging on the rights of the Oireachtas. And I'll demonstrate in a while how that is totally untrue. And from those big covenants, we then have a series of flowing international and human rights instruments, racial discrimination, which Davy would be familiar with. I think he's done some work around that, on the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of racial discrimination. We had the Genocide Convention, very important, because you've seen lately how Karadzic, for all his crimes in the former Yugoslav Republic, is at last being brought to justice, and it's important that that happens so that that principle is defended. And then we have refugees, protection for refugees, which again we are being pushed in the European context to try and defend. We must stick to that, to those rights that are laid down in the refugee international instruments. And then finally labour rights, which are again under attack, as Betty said, in terms of people's wages being reduced. And lots of that comes from the International Labour Organization, an offspring of the UN. Yeah, I suppose there's lots of this about now. This is almost like the Quran. We all know it off by heart. But I think it's important that it's our benchmark. You know, we do guarantee, the Republic guarantees in the proclamation equal rights and equal opportunities to all its citizens. And declares to resolve to pursue the happiness and prosperity of the whole nation. I underpinned "and" because there's an awful lot of revisionism around that this only refers to the Northern Ireland situation. I think that comma and the "and" kind of belies that. And again, I agree with Michael, it's a live document. We should be interpreting different as things change. And then realising the aspiration and repeating what some other people were saying, Declan in particular was saying that anniversary, or centenary, is a very useful one coming up. Because there was an attempt to try and realise the aspiration through in the democratic programme of the first Dáil in 1919. And some of these are very interesting. No child shall suffer hunger or cold from lack of food, clothing or shelter. And you can see the strong economic, social and cultural rights direction of it. And a welfare scheme whereby recipients will not be regarded as a burden, which, I mean, look at lone parents, it's a disgrace really, but rather entitled to the nation's gratitude and consideration. And it is an attempt to try and set down a welfare state, a la what eventually happened in Britain with the Beveridge Report. And to do away with the old poor law, charitable beneficence kind of model. So that, the other one was determining a standard of social and industrial legislation with a view to a general and lasting improvement in the conditions under which the working class live and labour. And that brings home to you again the Tesco and the Lewis strike, etc. That the same battles have been fought 100 years on. Subsequently, in Ireland, we had the 1937 Constitution, which largely defined rights as civil and political rights, with very little inclusion of justiciable economic, social and cultural rights. ESC rights are mentioned as policy principles for the guidance of policymakers, as others refer to in Article 45, but they're not justiciable. So there's no onus on the state to implement them, they're just for guidance only. So access to essential items such as housing, health or an adequate income are problematic in the Irish state. David Joyce, for instance, one aspect of accommodation, travel accommodation, but there are also huge inequalities in health outcomes. In previous years we had Austin O'Carroll did a really good analysis of the health system in Ireland and the inequalities of it, but the All Ireland Health Study has also done that. Like, the facts are there. And also 1/3 of people live in material deprivation in Ireland. That means they cannot afford 2 of 11 basic items, such as a warm coat, a second pair of shoes, an evening out once a week. And that's scandalous in a modern state, which is a wealthy state. So some believe that these are matters, that economic, social and cultural rights are matters for the legislature. And in Ireland that, of course, is the executive, because the tail wags the dog, even though it should be the other way around. I think it's interesting that we haven't got a government yet. Why not leave it like that? Just have a parliament and let the parliament elect people or appoint or anoint people to implement their decisions. It would be quite interesting, which is what democracy was supposed to be about. But there appears to be no will to address crucial issues for those with limited means on matters of housing, health, poverty, education, rural transport. There's no rural transport really, it's so scant it's invisible. Other than privatisation or fighting to maintain the advantages for those with most social and economic capital. And I could instance the promotion of private sector dominance of the housing market. We have a housing crisis, we have the means to address it, but ideologically there's no will to do it. I'll come to the Convention on the Constitution. The aftermath, just to give it some background, in the aftermath of the financial collapse of 2008, there was a widespread loss of confidence in politics, institutions and the structures of the state. And there was lots of talk about Dáil reform, a new politics, better governance, and the need for a citizens' assembly was one of those things that was thrown up. I'm not sure about. I think maybe there is a new politics emerging, but it's slowly getting there. Dáil reform, don't hold your breath. But anyway, in February 2012, the government then announced a convention on the Constitution, and that was set up by a resolution of both houses of the Oireachtas, and it was to take place originally within the lifetime of the 31st Dáil, and it largely did. It was a 100-member body composed of a chair, 66 ordinary citizens, randomly selected by a polling company. So that was interesting. You know, it was just a random selection. There was 33 Oireachtas members, including 2 parliamentarians from Northern Ireland. And it focused on, it was given an agenda, reviewing the electoral system, reviewing the presidential term of office. I remember Thomas Pringle said to me, if you had 100 things you wanted to do, that'd be 101. But same-sex marriage, that was an important one, a real important game last year. That, you know, it shows that if you have a structure, you can make things happen. The removal of blasphemy from the Constitution, improving participation of women in public life desperately needs to happen, and the reduction of the voting age. And this is an important one, so I've put it in red, other relevant amendments. So there was, I was always taught, if you see a string, pull it. So that was our way in. The convention was assisted by an expert advisory group of political scientists, lawyers and academics. And it worked by streams on topics for all decisions making in plenary. So it was a really good example of democracy in action. And they said organisations will not be represented but may make submissions, and some may be invited to make presentations on particular subject matters. And that did happen. And the convention reports were supposed to be delivered within the 12-month period. Well, these policy deadlines are never stuck to, took a bit longer. And each recommendation would be considered by government within 4 months. So that was it. This is the association with the school, the ESC Rights Initiative. Our formation, the announcement of the convention was initially greeted with some suspicion, even cynicism, because the terms of reference set the agenda, and it was a very narrow agenda. We would have wanted other things in there. There was little formal recognition of associational life. In this case, I'm talking about civil society, which is the way people organise, common interest groups, you know, organise and interrelate with the state in a democracy. So at the 2011 Sheehy Skeffington School, Michael Taft, who's an economist with Unite, proposed a People's Assembly, because nobody had a great belief in the formal structure of the convention, as an alternative parallel event, or a kind of a shadow event, if you like. And there's some, you know, some track record for that in human rights groups. A small working group came about to action this suggestion, very open membership, and had a fairly rapid expansion, and now has about 60 odd members. So it's a very open forum, people can join it, people can come along. You'll get all the information by email anyway, but you're welcome along. The possibilities for convention to deliver did improve, largely because of an inventive and dedicated chair, Tom Arnold, who was excellent, and a really good secretariat who was interested. The ESC Rights Initiative focused on getting ESC rights protection firstly on the agenda of the Constitution. That's the string I talked about pulling. We focused on building relationships with political members of the convention and the secretariat, and we hosted a major seminar not too far from here actually, with representation from the convention members, not the citizens, because they didn't want those to be interfered with in any way, but the political members came along to that. And that generated, all of those actions generated a strong collaborative approach with many representatives. We organised ourselves then to maximise input